This is BBC News. We'll have the headlines for you at the top of the hour, which is straight after this programme.
Hello everybody. Welcome to Talking Business Weekly with me, Mark Lobel. Let's take a look at what's on the show. How much is the boss worth? With a string of big names taking on new CEOs, why do they get pay packets worth tens of millions of dollars? Starbucks, Nike and Boeing have all made a change at the top. But can one individual really drive all the changes these huge global corporations need to thrive? I'm going to be discussing all this with these two. This top executive coach, who works with the likes of Google, Etsy and Citibank, tells me what it takes for a CEO to succeed as the leader of a multinational corporation. And this leading expert on CEO pay tells me how the US is leading the world and why too much pay at the top can be damaging for both companies and societies. Plus, we'll speak to serial entrepreneur Marcia Kilgour, the woman behind Beauty Pie and Fitflop, about the responsibility of running a company and what drives her to keep going even though she's already made her millions. Wherever you're joining me from, welcome to the show. This week, we're asking, how important is the boss to the success of a company? And just how much is a good one really worth? $5 million, $100 million, or $56 billion? The likes of Boeing, Disney, Nike and Starbucks have made some pretty high-profile and expensive changes recently. But companies this big have billions of dollars of sales each year, and the boss is just one person out of tens of thousands that are often spread right around the world. So what difference can one person really make? Struggling global coffee giant Starbucks has high hopes for its new boss. Brian Niccol was poached from the US restaurant chain Chipotle with a 4-year pay package worth more than $110 million and the use of a private jet, so he can commute long distances as he tries to turn the company round. And Nike is replacing CEO John Donahoe after a series of missteps that have cut its market share. Nonetheless, over nearly 5 years in charge, he's earned nearly $104 million, despite the company losing $40 billion worth of value. Another company to lose billions in value is plane maker Boeing. Its recently departed boss, Dave Calhoun, lost his job after struggling to deal effectively with a series of safety incidents, including 2 fatal accidents. Despite that, he got a pay package worth more than $30 million as he was leaving. This graph marks the change in CEOs, and as you can see, that can sometimes lead to a pretty big swing in a company's value as investors express their confidence or otherwise in the individual leading a company. For those individuals running an S&P 500 company in the US, the median pay package has been rising steadily, hitting a record high of $16.3 million last year. Shares often make up a big part of the typical award. The top earners were way above that. Hock Tan, who runs chip maker Broadcom, got $162 million. Nikesh Arora got $151 million at cybersecurity firm Palo Alto Networks. And investment giant Blackstone paid Steven Schwartzman $120 million. Since 2017, US companies have been required to disclose the gap between CEOs and the rest. And it now shows the median CEO is getting paid 196 times as much as the median worker. Disney's CEO, Bob Iger, is in his second stint in the job. Towards the end of the first run, he was asked by my colleague Amol Rajan what it does for American capitalism when there's a big differential between the guy at the top and the guy at the bottom.
I am proud of their compensation. I'm proud of the benefits that we've bestowed upon them. I'm proud of the opportunities we've created for them, because there's been huge upward mobility in our company by the very people that start at the bottom. I'm one of them, and enable themselves to not only work their way up, but to work their way up and earn more.
However much an employee earns, Elon Musk is hoping to outstrip them all. The founder of the electric car maker Tesla is going through the courts to get the $56 billion package shareholders awarded him. If it comes off, it would be the biggest pay package in US history. As the boss, he's had to make difficult decisions, like at X, where he cut lots of jobs quite abruptly when he took over. He explained the responsibility to my colleague, James Clayton.
I wouldn't say uncaring. The issue is like the company's either going to go bankrupt, or if we do not cut costs immediately, this is not a caring, uncaring situation. It's like if the whole ship sinks, then nobody's got a job.
So, what does it take for the CEO to make sure they're doing their job properly? What are the skills they need and that are worth so much money? I've been speaking to one top executive coach who works with the likes of Microsoft, Avon and Standard Chartered Bank. Alisa Cohn, welcome to the programme. I just want to begin with this because one of the most recent eye-watering pay packets that we've noticed, totaling more than $110 million plus the use of a jet to commute, has been for the new boss of Starbucks. So how does a company decide what a boss, a single individual, is actually worth?
Mostly it's the board who decides based on market comps, based on certainly bringing external consultants in, and also getting a little bit of a sense of what this new person could do, for the company. So in the case of Brian Nichols being brought into Starbucks, I think it's pretty obvious that there's a big hope for him and his ability to turn that company around, which is certainly needed right now.
If we stick with Starbucks' Brian Nichols just for a moment, he's been brought in to try and turn around a company which employs nearly 400,000 people around the world. And he has a host of problems, including products, stores and pricing. So how does a single individual go about tackling a list of problems like that?
A single individual does it because he's the CEO. And what he's able to do, what the CEO is able to do, is to certainly set a new strategy. So that may sound kind of like pie in the sky, but I think it's really important for the CEO to really assess what's going on and to set up a specific game plan to make that turnaround. The second thing the CEO can do is set the culture. So for example, in the case of Brian Nichols, him making sure that people are coming back to the office to work together, not in a draconian way necessarily, but understanding that there is a need to bring people back into the office. I don't agree or disagree with that, but setting the culture and setting the expectations is one example of what he's able to do to turn a large, company around with, as you said, 400,000 employees.
When we look at the likes of Boeing and Starbucks, the CEO is so often the figurehead and a lightning rod for any problems they encounter. But how much can they really be responsible if they're not the ones building the planes or making the coffee?
Well, they can be responsible in the sense that they're the ones who are setting the strategy for the company. They're the ones setting the culture for the company. And truthfully, the buck stops with them in terms of their accountability. So what they're able to do is sort of set up the context. And I think to your point, their role in some ways is to be that lightning rod. That's why it's so hard to be the CEO, because really any discontent, any concerns, any complaints all come back to you. Everyone's second guessing you. They don't like what you do. So there's a lot of pressure to both keep, the North Star that you're enacting inside of the company in light of so many different opinions and criticism around you.
Alisa, how important is it to the success of a CEO that they understand the culture of a company? So, for example, are in-house promotions a better bet for the CEO position, as recent events at Nestle and Nike indicate?
It's such an interesting question because so often boards want change. So they want to bring in someone from the outside. And when that person doesn't understand the culture, doesn't understand how to work inside of the company, that is in some ways a huge impediment. At the same time, you probably would think somebody who's been internal, for example, at Nike and even at Disney, they've been internal for a while and they maybe understand the culture too well and are in some ways not the agents of change. So I think as a board, when you're thinking about who the new CEO needs to be, you need to balance the need to do something inside of the culture to sort of find somebody who can do a good job in working inside of the culture, but also be able to bring the change. I honestly think that the new Nike CEO is probably the best exemplar of that, in the sense that he's obviously was there for 32 years, And then also he had time away. So he brings the sort of external, internal view that would be very useful, hopefully will be very useful for Nike right now.
You coach executives at some of the biggest names, including Google, Etsy, and Johnson & Johnson. So what are the most important characteristics to be a successful CEO, and can they be taught? Can anyone take on being a CEO at one of these major companies?
The most important quality that you need to be the CEO is knowing that you will be able to be the CEO. There is a sense of confidence and, healthy ego that you need to bring to the table. The second thing you need to bring to the table is an ability to adapt. So you've got to be able to assess the situation, make some important decisions, and then adapt them as you go. Can that be learned? I think it's an interesting question. There are so many people who get stuck at certain levels of, let's say, corporate America, because they don't have the ability to be decisive. They don't have the ability to be adaptive. And they may not in their hearts believe that they can lead this organization. So as a coach, I always think about inside and then also outside. You need to develop your own sort of internal state to know that you can handle the pressure, the difficulty, the spotlight. And then you also need to develop the external skills around decisiveness and around adaptability, also around strategic skills to be able to do a good job in that role.
Given all the executives you've worked with, what would you say motivates them? Is it as simple as money for them, or is there something more innate?
Most CEOs that I coach are motivated by knowing they can make a difference, knowing that they can turn a company around or grow a company even more. Also, they're touching, hundreds of thousands of people's lives, and that matters a lot to them. And the CEOs that I coach really get excited about the ability to have an impact in the world. And then, of course, there are trappings that come along with that, but they're really focused on stewardship.
Alisa Cohn, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
As I was telling you, there is normally a huge gap between what the CEO of a big corporation gets paid and what the average worker gets. So what impact does that gap have on companies and societies? I've been catching up with a top expert on CEO pay from the Washington-based progressive think tank, the Institute for Policy Studies. Sarah Anderson, welcome to the programme. If we look at the S&P 500, 19 companies paid their bosses more than $50 million last year. And yes, a lot of that was in shares, but how on earth do these companies come to those numbers? What makes one individual worth so much?
This is based on the foolish notion that the person in the corner office is somehow almost single-handedly responsible for corporate value, and that the people on the front lines in these companies who might have their actual hands on the product and delivering the service are worth only a fraction of that. And it's a problem that we've seen get worse and worse in the United States, and I've been sad to see that those CEO pay levels have been creeping up in other parts of the world as well, as the leaders of many global companies point to their American counterparts and say, hey, why am I not making anything like what that guy's making over there? And so it is really becoming a worldwide problem.
Sarah, you've been researching CEO pay for more than 30 years. What are the defining trends and changes you've noticed over that time?
Well, I didn't start quite back this far, but in the 1960s, the gap between a large company CEO in the United States and a typical worker was around 25 to 1. In the 1980s, it had crept up about 40 to 1, but then it really started exploding in the 90s, and now it's not uncommon for them to be 300 to 1, sometimes even thousands of times to 1 at low-wage companies. And so that has been a disturbing trend, because all of the research has shown that when you have those extreme gaps between CEO and worker pay, you tend to have lower morale and lower productivity and higher turnover rates. And so it's bad for business. It's not sustainable over the long term.
What are the broader impacts for an economy when you have the figureheads of companies such as Tesla boss Elon Musk earning so much? I mean, he's still going through the courts to try and get his $56 billion pay package, versus the lower pay of key workers such as nurses and teachers.
I think runaway CEO pay is bad for our economy, bad for democracy, and bad for business. Too much money is being siphoned and extracted from workers who are doing tough jobs at lower levels of the pay scale and funneled up to the top, to the point where we have so much money concentrated in so few hands that it is a threat to our democracy. It's a threat to pushing for policies. Like, we have not had a raise in the minimum wage in the United States for over a decade. Big, powerful corporate interests have blocked that kind of just small, modest steps of progress to having a more equitably shared economy. And it can contribute to people shirking their responsibilities because they feel like, why should I try that hard when I'm getting such a small reward for the labor that I'm putting into this?
A recent Bentley University Gallup survey found that 82% of Americans think it's important to avoid a major pay gap between the CEO and the average worker. And a think tank recently suggested higher tax rates for companies where the gap is too big. Do you think that's the sort of idea that could be a vote winner in the upcoming election, or is it politically too toxic for presidential candidates given they end up dealing with these individuals?
Pushing for policies to crack down on CEO pay would absolutely be a vote winner. I have spoken to groups in small towns, in swing states, in 4 different states now. I would walk into audiences of Republicans and expect to get a lot of debating, and I'd be all armed with my arguments against extreme CEO pay levels. And what I found was enormous common ground. The problem is that big money has huge influence over our political system, and candidates are afraid to rock the boat when it comes to their campaign finance. Not all of them, but every poll is showing that this is a transpartisan issue. Across the political spectrum, people are just fed up.
Do you think the pressure the majority of workers around the world have been feeling with inflation in recent years has made companies and politicians any more inclined to act on executive pay?
I would like to think so. I'd also like to think that the pandemic should have made it so much even more obvious that people doing some of the lowest paid work in our country are absolutely essential. And yet, as soon as the heat was off, companies stopped giving out their little extra hardship pay. They went right back down to the rock bottom wages at a lot of those essential companies. And, you know, I'm still waiting for it. I thought after the 2008 financial crisis that the, mystique would be gone, that these were not the top talents in our economy that were responsible for driving our economy off a cliff and resulting in millions of people losing their houses and their jobs. And yet almost immediately the big banks and other financial firms that were complicit in that national crisis turned around and started giving out big bonuses again. And so it's just a very deeply entrenched systemic problem, and it's going to take public policy, I think, to change it.
Sarah Anderson, thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
So how does one individual cope with all the weight and responsibilities of running a business? There are any number of big decisions to make, and then there's the responsibility for hundreds or thousands of staff and their livelihoods. It can all amount to a lot of pressure, but some individuals seem to thrive on that pressure. They include the serial entrepreneur who's made tens of millions of dollars from companies including Soap and Glory, Fitflop and Beauty Pie. Marcia Kilgour, welcome to the programme. On this week's show, we're looking at the importance of the CEO to a company, and you've started a string of companies of your own. In your experience, what is it that a CEO can do for a company that no one else can?
I think it's so important to have a great CEO and to have somebody who can really look at the different streams of work that need to be done, make those organized, prioritized, make sure that the different teams in the company are working together harmoniously, and ensuring that time is not wasted, money is not wasted, and energy is not wasted on things that are not going to move the dial for the company, while ensuring that there is a great enterprising and inspiring corporate culture throughout.
Marcia, when you're running a company responsible for the livelihoods of hundreds or thousands of people, but also have to think about other things like shareholders, climate change and products, to name a few, what weighs most heavily on you as an individual?
It's really the human cost, and making sure that everyone is given an opportunity to flourish in whatever it is that they've been hired to do within the business. It's so important for me that we are able to pull from each individual the talent that they both naturally have and then are able to develop over the course of their time within the business. It can be really a difficult thing to manage amidst all of the other pressures that you have. It's a hard balance to find.
You've also sold companies for big money. So as a founder and CEO, what is it like to let go of those companies and watch someone else take responsibility for something you've built up from scratch?
Now, for me, I am really a builder. And builders are people who, between year 1 and 7, really love that pace. They love unlocking really difficult problems. They really love building teams and making sure that everybody is running fast and efficiently and trying to get something from stasis to rolling. And that is where I am best. So for me, selling a business to a much larger corporation who might be better fit to do that next stage of the business is really quite natural for me. As long as they will respect what the business was about in the first place, not forget what made us successful, then for me, it's actually really okay.
And how did it all start for you? How did you know you wanted to be and could succeed as a serial entrepreneur and run company after company after company?
Well, here's the funny thing. I still don't know really, truly that I'm a successful entrepreneur. I think part of being wired as an entrepreneur is you never actually believe it. You think it's going to fall apart tomorrow. You think everything is just going to explode if you do one, make one small misstep. So I am really down right in the details, most likely to my own detriment, just because I really want everything to work. And I always believe that it's too good to be true.
One of your companies is the footwear brand Fitflop, which sells everything from flip-flops and sandals to trainers and boots. And I know you're not the CEO yourself, but this year the brand has been launching a refresh of its lineup and a global expansion. When you're leading a company, how do you know it's time to take major steps like that?
With any brand, in fact, every few years you do need to have a refresh. So you need to look back at what made you successful in the first place, and then look at how that might be relevant to the market today. You need to make sure that all your price points are in line with the market price points and any new competition that has come in. You need to look at where products are selling in volume, where technology is. If any of your competitors have come in and bettered your technology or gotten close to it, and where you are sitting in the market, whether that is America or the Americas, EMEA or Asia. And I think coming out of COVID, it was just a perfect time for us to reassess where we were as a brand, what our technology looked like, where we were sitting amidst the competitive landscape, and just, give it a big push.
Another of your companies is the membership-based cosmetics firm Beauty Pie, which sells discounted makeup. It was just last year that you appointed Kevin Cornils as the first CEO of Beauty Pie. So I just wonder, as a founder, how do you go about picking the person to be your CEO and run your baby?
It is hard to find someone who is smart enough to be able to run so many different programs in their head, as is necessary when you're running something like Beauty Pie. Beauty Pie, obviously, we launch dozens of new products every year. What we have to do is not only create those products and communicate them for our current members, but then also we have to go out into the universe and convince new prospective members that it's a great idea to join our club. So those two streams, in addition to building your own software, in addition to all the legal things that come along with creating your own product with laboratories, making sure that everything is, according to the highest level of cosmetic standards and safety, is an awful lot to do. So in interviewing CEO candidates, I'll just say that you could probably eliminate quite a lot of them just because they don't have the intellectual bandwidth. And then, of course, they have to be able to put up with me. which is a whole additional thing because I am quite impatient. I always want it to be better. You've got to have a lot of patience also to deal with a founder who's very passionate.
If we go back to the CEO theme of the show, how many companies is it that you've started now? And what makes you want to keep going rather than putting your feet up and enjoying the rewards of all that hard work?
I believe I've now had in my experience 5 companies. I'll tell you, I just continuously I'm thinking of ideas. And I don't know what I would do all day. I think probably in a past life, if you believe in that kind of thing, I must have been a market trader because what really thrills me is finding great stuff and then selling it to people, especially when selling it to people, you know, they are going to be very, very happy with whatever the outcome of them using that product is. And getting that feedback is like a continuous pat on the back. I just love to invent things. And I think just being able to improve the status quo is an intellectual challenge for me. And then being able to bring it to prospective customers is a really social thing. And as I'm not an employee, right, I have to sort of create my team. So I've got that family vibe and a lot of people to stimulate my mind every day.
Marcia Kilgour, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's all for this week. You can keep up with all the latest on the global economy on the BBC News website and its smartphone app. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on social media. I'm at Mark Lobel on X. Till next time, bye-bye.
Hello there. Saturday's sunny skies will gradually be eroded by cloud and then wind and rain for many as we close out Sunday. Yes, it's going to gradually turn wet and windy, particularly from the south and west. Now, we've